Yeah, for
It
sure.
is a powerful thing, though. If a coach tells you that your child is talented
For sure,
in
definitely.
a sport, you're like, what?
Yeah.
My child has a gift or ability? We got to do this.
Yeah.
So what is that there? Is that what caught me when we were chatting on the phone is you immediately said, well, that's a very American thing.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think obviously just if we geographically, you know, to kind of even to go to St. Louis is 3 hours. Like people in Scotland would be like, you drove 3 hours for a game. They'd think you're mad. Where here it's like the norm, even for youth, for really young kids. So I think there's a bit of that maybe can't be helped. But I also think that the reality is in the UK, the better a player you are, the less money you pay.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of At Home with Emily. It's a podcast about creating a life you love, and I am your host, Emily Wood. If you have been following us this month, every Wednesday, we have been talking about kids and sports. Very broad topic, but if you are a parent, which most of us are, grandparent, aunt, uncle, any of the things, you've probably been exposed to kids' sports in some capacity. And I don't know if I just missed out as a kid, but it just seemed a lot less intense back in the 90s, which was a long time ago now. You know, but with us today, we have Coach Ben Taylor from Drury University, and he is the head men's soccer coach. And I am so grateful that you came in today after your practice this morning at 7 a.m.
No problem. I'm excited to be here. I'm finally warming up, so that's nice. And excited to kind of have a chat.
Nice and warm here in the podcast studio.
There you go.
So, Coach, right away, people are picking up, of course, on the accent that we hear, and especially those who are listening and not watching. It's like, wait a second. The U.S. is not where you were born.
No. So I was born in Dundee, Scotland, and I lived in a few different places in the UK. But it's funny you bring up kind of the intensity of sports. Really, growing up for me, it was only soccer. That was kind of that was really it. Yeah.
Is that the main sport?
Is the main sport? Yeah, okay. Is the main sport. And everyone is soccer daft, football daft, soccer daft.
All the time.
All the time, yeah. If it's not on TV or playing in the street, you know, with your team, whatnot.
Well, and it's such an easy, all you need is a ball.
Exactly.
You know, it's such an easy game to get involved in and pick up games. And like, I feel like there's not as much as that anymore.
Yeah, I know we're going to get into it probably in a little bit more depth, but that's the biggest difference I notice from Scotland, the UK to here. You know, we would think nothing of going down to the park and kicking around with our friends and kind of practicing, but we didn't really know we were practicing. We were just playing. Yeah,
just playing, which is the point of sports.
And exactly.
Especially for kids.
Yeah, and I do feel like here, you know, if there's not a coach, there's not balls, there's not bibs, pennies, a referee, a whistle. It's kind of like we can't play, which is a bit strange.
You just don't see the same thing that you would see in Scotland where just kids playing here, there, everywhere.
No, and I think it's changed a little bit with like computer games and stuff, but as far as my experience, all we were ever doing was playing soccer, you know, and enjoying it, playing with your mates and
play with your mates.
Yeah.
So here we are in the U.S.
Yeah.
And you have been involved in soccer here since college.
Yes.
Is that when you originally
so
came
I came to the U.S. in 2007.
Okay.
So and played at Drury and really enjoyed Drury, Springfield, the Ozarks. But even when I was playing, I was doing some coaching. So I've always kind of been involved in it, and I do enjoy it. In youth sports,
It's so fun to see kids grow so much, even just year to year. You know, my boys are in kindergarten and third grade, and so just what they can do year to year, it's amazing. The coordination and how they grow, and I put my kids in everything. And I think everybody starts out trying different things.
For sure.
But there is a little bit of a culture that has developed where if you're told your child is good at something, that's
yeah,
it.
for sure. Yeah.
We are buying all the things,
Yeah.
we're signing up for all the things,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden we're driving to Florida for a tournament at age 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, for
It is a
sure.
powerful thing, though. If a coach tells you that your child is talented
For sure.
in
Definitely.
a sport, you're like, what?
Yeah.
My child has a gift or ability. We got to do this.
Yeah.
So what is that there? Is that what caught me when we were chatting on the phone is you immediately said, well, that's a very American thing.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think obviously just if we geographically, to kind of even to go to St. Louis is 3 hours. Like people in Scotland would be like, you drove 3 hours for a game. They'd think you're mad. Where here it's like the norm, even for youth, for really young kids. So I think there's a bit of that maybe can't be helped. But I also think that the reality is in the UK, the better a player you are, the less money you pay. I feel like, and it's changing a little bit with the MLS clubs, but here it seems like the better you are, the more money you pay.
The better you are, the more money you pay.
Yeah, because you're traveling to different tournaments. You're, coaches here, club coaches can make a full-time living. A lot of the what we would call grassroots in the UK are volunteers. So you'd maybe pay a few dollars a week just to pay the refs. There was no kind of financial incentive. So that's a big difference straight away, kind of the geographic.
The money? The business side
I think
of
it's
it?
a business, yeah. And I'm sure that's similar with other sports. But with soccer, it's definitely a big business, yeah.
Big business.
Big business.
Meaning those who are organizing it, or what do you mean by that?
So, like, I think most clubs now, have directors that, make a full-time living, coaches that get paid, and it's kind of the norm here. And listen, I benefited from that. I've been paid to coach youth, so I'm not knocking it. But I think when we talk about, a player with talent, and you could argue sometimes maybe a little bit of the purity of the game. As soon as someone becomes a bit more of a business, maybe the purity of the sport just erodes a little bit. I'm not saying fully, but I think it makes it a bit more challenging. Maybe.
I'm sure you've had frank conversations with parents seeking your advice on what to do. I do see that there is a lot of pressure on parents to keep going, keep paying, get the private instruction, get on this team, get to that team, get on that team. What is your take on that? Is that a necessary evil, or do they not necessarily have to be doing that to reach the same end result?
I think that the main thing, the most important thing for a parent when looking at clubs is the coach. Who is coaching your kids, your son or daughter? Because for me, it's an education. My job is to not go out and just let them play. My job's to teach them the game. Now, if that's not the case, what are you paying for? Are you paying just for them to kick around and then play games on the weekend? So I'm a big believer in, as a youth coach, you need to teach them the game. And I think where it's become a little bit skewed now in my landscape, recruiting and stuff, is there's so many different platforms, different leagues. One day one platform's the best, the next day the next one's the best. So then what happens is kids, I think bypass who's actually coaching my team to be with, well, I want to be ECNL, I want to be MLS Next, I want to be, whatever it may be. That may not always be the best for your development, because it depends on playing time, how's training, what's your relationship like with the coach. Because ultimately, I think with youth players, it's got to be fun. They've got to enjoy it. If they don't enjoy it, what's the point?
Kind of the biggest point, right? is we do want them to have fun.
Yeah.
I try to make it my default question when the kids finish their game or come off the court or whatever it is. Did you have fun?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, and I'm thinking, that game didn't go very well, I'm just happy.
Yeah.
Okay, they had fun.
For sure.
So let's keep going.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a test for me as a parent.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I am also not trying to train a D1 athlete. I'm just trying to raise good kids.
For sure.
From your standpoint, you're saying, fun should be the point, but, if you're really wanting to develop and look at the coaches, what are the other things that we need to keep in mind? Do we need to be in the year-round mindset if we're trying to train a D1 athlete? And if so, at what age?
I feel like, I think one of the things the US does really well is because of the amount of sports available, kids grow up playing, baseball, basketball, maybe American football, soccer, swimming. I think that's great.
Multi-sports,
yeah. I think that is really, really positive. I do think to be the best, probably around that 12, year old, you may have to start making decisions. But I look at it a little bit different to in the sense of, I'm not saying you have to make full-blown decisions, but maybe you have to start eliminating. If you're doing 6 sports, you maybe need to do,
2 or 3 that you really like.
Yeah. And then if you've got a real knack for soccer and you have a high ceiling and you can go and achieve what you want to achieve as the player, and the family are comfortable with you achieving that, there's nothing wrong with going all in. But
around
I would say
you're
12,
about after puberty.
Yeah,
I
think
they're hitting that time.
I think so, because when the game goes from 9v9 to 11v11 is right around that age, and I think tactically it becomes a little bit different. So you potentially miss out on some instruction that will benefit you in the future. But ultimately, we talk about creating kind of a D1 athlete or a college athlete, professional athlete. I feel like if the kid's really enjoying it in their environment, there's not really a decision to make, because they're happy and comfortable with improving and getting better. I think it's maybe making that decision when they're unsure and oh God, I've got to give that up to do this. And for me, it should almost be quite not an easy decision to give sports up, but what do you enjoy the most? What are you good? Are you okay? Maybe. Soccer, you could probably be the best at, but maybe you like basketball more, and you maybe can't quite be as good at basketball, but if you enjoy that more, go and play basketball. I think, because you get into college and it does become more of a job.
It's a job.
And then obviously the pros, more of a job, it is a job. So I do think that enjoyment and that I'm a big believer in development. They can, work hard, and we can kind of put the right principles in the players, but working hard, enjoying it, and learning. Like, you have to learn. Like, coaching is teaching. So my job is to teach them the game, not just to put cones down or say, call me coach, as we discussed.
That's what we talked about. Coach is a title that's earned, right?
Yeah.
Do you have, or do you see burnout or injuries or overuse? I mean, soccer is a lifetime sport, so it's not as much as some of these other ones, but any concerns that you have with the culture that we've created of it's the weekend, we're going, it's a holiday, we're going, and just non-stop in the same sport?
I there's definitely a correlation between turf, like turf fields, artificial turf, and like knee injuries, I think, with male and female, more so female players actually. And I think that's overuse. I think there is a piece of that too, where, the reality is when you're wearing cleats, if you're putting your foot into grass and mud and you twist, there's some give. There's no give in turf, so that hurts that. The argument to that though is, maintaining and keeping grass fields as nice as turf would be is very, very expensive. But I do think there's more that can be done. I look at like high school seasons. If we're talking development, college, it can be the same too. But kids can sometimes play 3 and 4 games in a week on turf.
Wow.
I think that's where injuries come from. I think that should be looked at as far as maybe more training period and less games. But I think there is a correlation between injury, like overuse, injuries, especially with artificial turf, and even tournaments. You go to tournaments now. I go to recruit, and kids sometimes they could play 2 games in one day, and then it's a lot on your So
what do you see in terms of burnout with that type of culture? Yeah,
I think I think there's burnout. Physical, and if we're talking more mental burnout, I think that comes back to, we spoke about selecting the league and the club over the coach and maybe your teammates and the enjoyment. So
if you can keep that community, you think that that's really important?
I think the right coach is really important, because I think the right coach plays the players enough minutes to keep them engaged, which enjoyment comes from. I think a lot of burnout comes from, if I'm traveling to St. Louis for a weekend and I'm going to play, we've got 3 games and I'm going to play, there's 3 90-minute games and I'm only going to play, 45 minutes. I would be burnt out. I'd be like, why are we driving all this way, spending all this money to only play? But the problem is, maybe you're doing that because you're in MLS Next, ECNL.
So you're in the league. You can keep the joy in it.
I think so.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that comes with the coach.
That lifts the pressure off the child.
I think so, yeah. And I do believe that comes from the coach. Because I think there's a way to, are you having conversations with a kid? Are you explaining why? Are you explaining, this? Are you explaining that? Because... and there's different games. Listen, I do think it is important to teach about winning and losing, how you win, how you lose too. But there are opportunities within a team to, utilise your squad. And I think the mental burnout more comes from a player and the kid on a team. I mean, imagine that ride back from St. Louis when you've only played 45 minutes out of 3 games with your parents. Everyone's upset in the car. Kids sitting there like, why have I?
The car ride home is really tough.
Why have I just done that? I'm not saying the parents say it, but they've spent all that money. The kid's not really happy. The kid's not.
Our last guest from the park board, she was saying it's really important to never talk about the money that you spend.
Yeah.
Because of what that does to your kid's psyche.
Sure. Yeah.
And you're the grown-up, so you decided.
You decide, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so it's not, we spend all this money and you're not
for sure.
giving 100%.
No, for sure.
You made that decision as a family.
Absolutely. I more think between I more imagine the tension of driving back between, mum and dad, and it may not even be said, but they're a bit like, we've just spent thousands of dollars, so they're not in the best mood.
Yeah.
The kid's not in the best mood because he's maybe not played as much as he or she would have liked to.
And that's not what sports are supposed to be.
No, especially with the young kids, not at all.
So what is your hope going forward for youth sports in the U.S.? And, just you've seen it from the bird's eye view for so many years and players coming up. What would you like to see?
I think one of the things I'd like to see is parents to really do their research in terms of who's coaching your kid. Look at their track record of, ask parents about that coach when their kids have maybe graduated. Find a way to connect. And what was your experience like? Not with the league, not with the club, with that coach. Was that coach good? Was that coach maybe not so good? Because I think when it comes to the enjoyment and the passion for the game and, whether you want to go to college or not, we talk about it's meant to be enjoyable. I do really genuinely believe that starts with the coach. So I would, and there's good coaches at every level.
And
absolutely.
Such an important role model.
I believe so. I said earlier, I coach at Drury now and I've got my boys that play, but I've also got a big group of kids that I coached. That's prideful for me. Like, I take a ton of pride in that. One, because it's great to have seen them since they were 11, 12. Now they're 21. But 2, that they chose after that experience to actually come and play for me. that's what it's about, in my opinion, because of the relationships.
Makes sense.
So yeah, that's why I do what I do anyway.
Anything else you want to add?
No. Great conversation. Happy to answer any other questions, but no.
Well, I appreciate the perspective, and thank you for coming in.
No problem.
And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of At Home with Emily. If you are watching on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe so you're notified when our next episode drops. That's every Wednesday. And if you missed the first 3 parts in this sports and kids series, please be sure to check those out as well. You can follow Around the Ozarks on Instagram, X, as well as Facebook. And you can head to AroundTheOzarks.com to sign up for our daily newsletter. We'll see you there.